I do solemnly swear to tell the truth.
I am honored to be here today to discuss this important matter.
Crack of the gavel split the air like lightning. Judge Judy's voice followed, sharp as glass, slicing across the courtroom. That's enough. You'll stop right there. For a heartbeat, time froze. Every head turned. The weight of authority pressed down, daring Jasmine Crockett to fold under it. Murmurs trembled through the benches, soft but urgent, as though the crowd had just witnessed the unthinkable, an attempt to choke a voice mid-breath. And yet, in that heavy pause, Crockett didn't flinch. Her eyes narrowed, not in anger but in calculation, as if she understood more than the gavel, more than the command, more than the expectation of silence itself. The silence spread, expanding like a living thing. It was supposed to be Judy's weapon, silence as domination, but instead it became Crockett's canvas. A moment that should have ended her words instead sharpened them. Then came the first ripple of the outside world bleeding in. A phone buzzed in the back row. Screens lit up. Hashtags were already forming. Feshy Spoke Anyway floated in neon letters across TikTok clips. A tweet scrolled past in real time. Judge Judy tear-eyed it, but Jasmine's eyes said everything. The camera crews leaned forward, their lenses hungrier than ever. They knew. This wasn't just testimony anymore. This was history packaging itself for virality. The frame of Crockett's poised stillness, was destined for millions of screens, looped endlessly, dissected, remixed with captions like, "One calm crushes chaos." Inside the room, the oxygen seemed to thin. Judy's gavel still rested on the bench, but its authority had drained. Her command echoed faintly, like a shout in a canyon, already swallowed by the silence it was meant to control. Crockett finally drew a breath. The faintest lift of her chin carried more defiance than a speech could. Her body language said what her lips had yet to release: "You will not erase me." The audience leaned forward, waiting, hungry, knowing they stood at the edge of something bigger than procedure. It was no longer about evidence, motions, or rulings. It was about presence. She tried to silence her. The narrator's voice could have said, if narrators lived in real courtrooms. But silence is exactly what made the room explode. And in that explosion of stillness, the real trial began. The courtroom was more than wood and marble. It was a stage designed to declare who mattered and who did not. Every polished bench, every towering column, every carved emblem above the judge's chair was meant to remind the public of hierarchy, the silent choreography of power. And seated at the highest point, Judge Judy embodied that design. She was the architecture personified, stern, unyielding, a figure who had built her brand on cutting others off before they finished their sentences. For decades, she thrived on that edge, wielding interruptions like weapons, turning silence into punishment. Audiences had cheered her abrasiveness, mistaking intimidation for authority. She was the old guard, sharp, confident, dismissive, believing the gavel would always give her the last word. But in this room, something unusual had shifted. Jasmine Crockett did not flinch the way others did. She didn't lower her voice or retreat under the shadow of the bench. She radiated a different energy, resilience carved by battles that didn't happen under bright lights, but in quieter, harsher spaces where voices like hers had been ignored. Where silence was survival, not submission. The contrast was cinematic. Judy's power came from the institution behind her, reinforced by robes, ritual, and applause from decades of television. Jasmine's strength came from within, a calm that held steady under pressure, an internal compass pointing unshakably toward truth. If Judy represented control, Jasmine embodied presence. If Judy's weapon was interruption, Jasmine's defense was unbreakable composure. The stakes became clear with every passing second. This was no longer about the technicalities of a case. It was a battle for something deeper. Who owns the right to be heard? Who decides when a voice deserves to finish its sentence? The air carried that tension like static. Spectators whispered, and somewhere in the back, the glow of phones lit faces like candles. Clips of Judy snapping, the gavel pounding, and Jasmine's steady eyes were already slicing their way across social media. On X, posts multiplied by the minute. Jasmine Crockett didn't blink. Judge Judy did. Another power vis poise just one round one. On TikTok, edits appeared with music swelling beneath the freeze frame of Jasmine's gaze. Subtitles flashed in bold. This isn't just a trial, it's a battle for voice itself. And suddenly the courtroom was not a closed space at all. Its walls dissolved into millions of living rooms, subway rides, Coffee shops, offices where people hunched over glowing screens. The hierarchy Judy relied on had collided with a new hierarchy, the court of public opinion. Here, arrogance no longer guaranteed applause. Authority was fragile, conditional. And Jasmine had tapped into that fragility without raising her voice, without a single dramatic gesture. Her calm was enough to turn the gavel into dead weight. Every second stretched, not with boredom but with awareness. The old guard and the new had locked eyes. The stakes had slipped beyond law, beyond order, beyond televised ritual. This was about survival of dignity in the face of attempted erasure. And as hashtags multiplied, one truth emerged: silence had shifted sides. No longer a tool of control, it was now a weapon of resistance. Jasmine owned it. Judy had lost it. The courtroom had declared its verdict before the judge could speak. For years, Judge Judy had been more than a judge. She was a cultural figure, a brand of authority wrapped in black robes and sharp one-liners. Her tongue was as quick as her gavel, her reputation built on shutting people down before they could meander through excuses. Viewers adored it. They laughed when she cut off defendants mid-sentence, clapped when she mocked hesitation, celebrated her as the embodiment of no-nonsense control. Her empire wasn't just the courtroom, it was the idea that interruption was justice, that humiliation could be entertainment. In that glare of studio lights, she was untouchable. Millions tuned in, not for legal nuance, but for her dominance. She became the queen of silencing, smiling at her own power, rewarded for every dismissal. But irony works in quiet ways. What happens when the queen of silencing meets someone who refuses to be erased? Jasmine Crockett didn't argue louder, she didn't break into theatrics. She simply stood her ground, and in that stillness, Judy's greatest strength twisted into her weakness. Hubris whispered that the gavel would always tip the balance. Habit told her interruptions would always end the conversation. Yet on this day, the weight of her own legacy bore down like an anchor. Every sharp word carried expectation, every glare invited comparison to the woman she had been on screen for decades. The audience, once entertained, now measured her differently. And in that measurement, the cracks showed. Dominance felt less like justice, more like fragility disguised. What had built her reputation now risked dismantling it. The queen of silencing had met her mirror, and the reflection staring back was no longer laughing. Jasmine Crockett had been here before. Not in this exact courtroom, not under Judge Judy's glare, but in the countless spaces where her voice was measured, doubted, or dismissed before it could even land. She knew the sting of being underestimated, the quiet cuts of being spoken over, the gaslight phrases disguised as civility: calm down, you're overreacting, wait your turn. Each moment pressed against her like weights, shaping not weakness but a core of steel. Her career had been a study in resilience. Every dismissal carved another layer of resolve. Every interruption taught her the art of patience. Every mistrust forced her to sharpen her words until they cut clean. Where others saw obstacles, she collected lessons. Where others felt silenced, she discovered power in timing. The pain of those experiences never vanished, but they transformed. They became the quiet fire in her chest, the reason she could stand unshaken when authority tried to drown her out. To anyone watching now, her calm looked effortless. But it was forged in years of struggle, in battles most of the audience would never see. Nights replaying conversations in her head, moments questioning whether truth could ever be enough, mornings waking to fight again anyway. That history mattered here, because while Judge Judy wielded the gavel as though it could end the story, Crockett had already rehearsed this script 1,000 times in her life. She knew the pauses, the looks, the attempts to erase. She had been uniquely prepared for this moment, not by privilege but by survival. So when silence fell, Jasmine stood steady, not despite her past, but because of it. The interruptions came like drumbeats. Judge Judy's voice rose, clipped and impatient, slicing across the courtroom again and again. Answer directly. Bang. Stay on point. Bang. Each command struck like a hammer meant to split stone. But Jasmine Crockett did not splinter. She absorbed the noise, each interruption sinking into her silence, as if she were letting the storm wear itself out. Every pause became deliberate, every inhale calculated. The more Judy pressed, the more Jasmine slowed. It was the oldest trick of dominance. Speak louder, speak faster, choke the rhythm before the other side can find footing. And yet, Crockett refused to surrender the rhythm. She held her sentences until the space demanded their return, waiting just long enough for every ear in the room to lean forward. The gavel slammed again, rattling the wood like a warning shot. Crockett's eyes lifted toward the bench, steady, unblinking. No words yet, just a gaze that froze the air. The courtroom exhaled in a collective gasp, the kind of sound that belongs to spectators who know they are standing at the edge of history. That gaze spread faster than sound. Already, phones buzzed with new clips. The stare that stopped the gavel. On TikTok, edits layered slow motion over Jasmine's pause, the gavel bang looping into a beat drop. Captions flared across screens. Power doesn't shout, it waits. Inside, the whispers swelled. She's not moving. Look at her face. She's not scared. The gallery's unease wasn't about volume. It was about the inversion of expectation. The judge, the one meant to control, was losing ground to silence itself. Judy tried again, her voice rising sharper. You will not. Another bang. But this time her sentence faltered. For the first time, hesitation bled into her cadence, and Crockett, still motionless, allowed that hesitation to hang like a verdict. On X, commentary spread in real time. She just made Judy stumble. Another post, racking up thousands of likes in minutes. We're watching a queen dethrone herself. The interruptions continued, but each one grew weaker, more desperate. The courtroom had shifted its allegiance without words, without speeches. Authority was supposed to command silence, yet the silence belonged to Crockett now. She wielded it like armor, a calm so unshakable it turned every bang of the gavel into background noise. Meanie, dramas unfolded in sequence, the echo of wood on wood. Crockett's chin lifting fractionally higher, the murmurs swelling, another phone buzzing in the gallery, Judy's glare tightening, the faintest smirk tugging at someone's lips behind Jasmine. Each beat stacked atop the last until the room felt less like a courtroom and more like a stage for collapse. By the fourth interruption, the irony was unbearable. Judy's power, once theatrical, now looked brittle. Crockett's restraint, once subtle, had grown monumental. She wasn't shouting, she wasn't arguing, she was enduring. And in that endurance, she became undeniable. Social media mirrored the crescendo. Memes sprouted instantly, a side-by-side of Judy with the caption, volume to power, and Jasmine captioned, patience to power. Comment sections lit with awe. I've never seen Judy look so rattled. This woman just turned a courtroom into her stage. And beneath the noise, the truth hardened. This was no longer a clash of personalities. It was a war of presence, a contest over who owned the silence, who defined the air itself. Judy kept pounding, kept pressing, but each strike only carved deeper into her own unraveling. The room no longer gasped at her words. They gasped at Crockett's stillness. By the time the echoes faded, it was clear the gavel was not leading the room anymore. Jasmine Crockett was. The moment broke like glass under strain. Judge Judy interrupted again, her voice raised, the gavel slamming with a confidence that felt rehearsed. You will not grandstand in my courtroom. You will answer my question directly, or you will not answer at all. The words cracked out like finality, meant to end everything, to remind the gallery that her word was law. But then came Jasmine Crockett's reply. It wasn't shouted, it wasn't rushed, it wasn't defensive. It arrived with the weight of stillness sharpened into steel. Judge, she said, her tone measured, deliberate, slicing through the air like a blade made of ice. I don't need permission to speak truth, and truth doesn't wait for your timing. The silence that followed was electric. Not the silence Judy had once controlled, but a silence that rose from the audience itself, like oxygen sucked from the room, like the world holding its breath at the impossibility of what had just been spoken. The gavel hung midair, as though Judy had forgotten her own hand was holding it. For the first time, the interruption did not land. For the first time, the command collapsed under the weight of a reply that was not anger, not pleading, but calm defiance. The audience felt the shift before Judy did. Murmurs spread, faster than whispers should travel, as if the sound carried on nerves instead of air. A spectator leaned forward, clutching the bench as though witnessing a collapse in real time. Phones rose again, recording, trembling slightly with the adrenaline of knowing this clip would go viral before they left the building. On X, the first posts were already erupting. Wait, did Jasmine just silence Judge Judy? Another, racking up thousands of likes within minutes. Cold, calculated, historic. I've never seen Judy freeze like that. Judy's mouth opened, but no words followed. She blinked, stunned into hesitation, her confidence slipping. For decades, she had relied on control as muscle memory, the gavel as punctuation, her tongue as weapon. But in this instant, all three betrayed her. The gavel was heavy, her words stuck, her authority fractured by the calm precision of Crockett's answer. It wasn't just a courtroom reversal. It was emotional whiplash. The judge, once untouchable, suddenly looked exposed. And the woman she had tried to silence, dismissed, interrupted, underestimated, was the one who had written the script's turning point. The gallery reacted as though watching a stage play turn unscripted. Someone gasped audibly, another stifled a laugh, while a third muttered under their breath, "Oh my God!" She flipped it. The energy was no longer Judy's to command. The room leaned toward Crockett, waiting, needing more. On TikTok, edits were already dropping, soundtracked with cinematic strings, Jasmine's line highlighted in bold white text, "Truth doesn't wait for your timing." Captions flooded in, "This is bigger than court. This is cultural." Another clip stitched with commentary. "Did we just see the moment Judy lost the room?" And indeed, Judy faltered. She tried to press again, but the words caught like gears grinding without oil. "You will," she began, then stopped. Her eyes darted, searching for ground that was no longer beneath her feet. The interruption that had always been her weapon now hung limp, sounding more like panic than power. Crockett didn't move quickly. She didn't seize the moment with triumph or theatrics. She let the silence do the work. Her calm body language radiated inevitability. She had endured enough battles to know the cost of forcing the moment. This wasn't about speed. This was about control redefined. That restraint amplified the impact. The audience understood it. Online reactions multiplied. She didn't even need to raise her voice. Judge Judy tried to silence Jasmine Crockett, but Jasmine silenced Judy instead. The irony was unbearable. The queen of silencing, who had built her empire on shutting down others, had been outmaneuvered by a reply so measured it exposed her own hubris. Her authority cracked not because of chaos, but because of composure. Her dominance didn't collapse under an argument, but under her own excess, her interruptions, her insistence, her hunger to control. The contradictions revealed themselves, layer by layer. Judy, who had always preached discipline, looked shaken. Judy, who had mocked hesitation, now stumbled over her own pauses. Judy, who thrived on decisive authority, now stared at her gavel as though unsure if it meant anything anymore. The audience shifted, aligning themselves in real time. The old loyalty to the bench eroded, replaced with a new respect for the calm defiance standing below it. Crockett wasn't just speaking for herself. She had become the embodiment of every voice told to wait, every sentence cut short, every truth dismissed as inconvenient. A journalist in the gallery scribbled furiously, already drafting the headline that would land by evening. "When silence belonged to Jasmine." Meanwhile, on Instagram Reels, comments cascaded. "The way she said it chills. I've seen Judy cut down 100 people, but this was different. This time Judy lost." And the clip replayed again and again, the same 10 seconds looping Judy's interruption, the gavel bang, Crockett's cold reply, the stunned silence. Each loop made the reversal feel sharper, more monumental. Inside the room, Judy finally lowered the gavel, but the sound it made was hollow. The authority that once followed it no longer arrived. The silence stayed with Crockett, heavy and unbroken, like a crown that had quietly passed from one head to another. The threshold had been crossed. The interruption failed, the reply landed, the authority shifted. And the world was already watching, already dissecting, already rewriting Judy's legacy with captions and hashtags. The queen of silencing had been silenced. And Jasmine Crockett had done it without raising her voice. What began as a clash of personalities had now swollen into something larger, an ideological battle laid bare before everyone watching. On one side stood Judge Judy, the emblem of institutional authority, her gavel once the unquestioned symbol of order. On the other stood Jasmine Crockett, carrying nothing but her composure, her presence, and the dignity of refusing to be erased. The silence still lingered, humming with the weight of what had shifted. Judy's arrogance, so familiar, so rehearsed, had curdled into something awkward. Her sharp tongue, usually greeted with nervous laughter, now drew no applause. Instead, the audience's awe began to flow toward the woman she had tried to bury under interruptions. For decades, Judy's authority had been framed as strength. But in this moment, every strike of the gavel now looked desperate, every raised voice sounded defensive. The hypocrisy glared. The judge who prided herself on discipline had lost her own. The arbiter of fairness had exposed her bias in real time. The self-styled queen of order had become the architect of chaos. Crockett never declared victory. She didn't need to. Her victory was written in the posture of the room itself. People leaned toward her, not Judy. The respect that once defaulted to the bench now belonged to the woman who refused to bend. Even Judy seemed to feel it, the shift of gravity away from her, the cold realization that she was no longer commanding the room, but clinging to it. The ripple effects were instant. Online, commentary sharpened, authority crumbled the second dignity stood tall. This wasn't Judy's win or lose show anymore. This was her hypocrisy exposed. TikTok edits spliced Judy's interruptions against Crockett's one reply, captioned, "Arrogance meets composure. Composure wins." Inside the courtroom, the transformation was visceral. A spectator whispered. She flipped the script. Another muttered, "I've never seen Judy look small." The moral clarity was unavoidable. Authority wielded without respect collapses under its own weight, while dignity in silence reshapes the balance of power. Judy's eyes darted, trying to reassert control, but every gesture seemed hollow now. The audience's awe had redrawn the narrative. Crockett wasn't just surviving interruptions anymore, she was exposing them. Her calm had become mirror and magnifier, reflecting the hypocrisy so clearly that even Judy seemed to falter beneath its glare. The ideological battle was decided in the audience's perception. Authority without humility felt brittle. Dignity without permission felt unstoppable. By the time the gavel struck again, the sound no longer crowned Judy's power. It echoed like an afterthought, drowned out by the collective awareness that something historic had just unfolded. The showdown was over. Judy had entered with arrogance, but Jasmine Crockett left with awe. When the final echoes of the gavel faded, the silence left behind was louder than any command. The courtroom did not cheer, did not clap, did not erupt. It simply breathed, heavy and deliberate, as if everyone present had recognized the gravity of what had just unfolded. Jasmine Crockett did not rise in triumph, nor did she bask in the sudden wave of respect pressing toward her. She simply sat in her chair composed, her expression untouched by anger or glee. That composure itself was the message. Strength isn't about drowning others out. Strength is refusing to be drowned. Judge Judy, for all her years of dominance, could not mask the falter in her voice, the crack in her rhythm. What once seemed invincible now looked human, fragile even. And in that fragility, the audience saw the truth: authority without restraint is brittle, but dignity without volume endures. Outside the courthouse, the clip had already become a cultural refrain. On X, pinned at the top of trending feeds, strength isn't volume, it's composure. On TikTok, millions replayed the moment, captions flashing. She didn't just answer. She redefined the answer. In living rooms, classrooms, and offices, people who had never heard Jasmine Crockett's name before now repeated it with a kind of reverence usually reserved for legends. Yet inside, Crockett did not reach for that legend. She simply gathered her papers, rose with calm precision, and walked out unshaken. Each step seemed to echo louder than Judy's gavel, as though the floor itself recognized who now held the room's respect. Those watching would carry the memory forward. They would remember the way silence overtook noise, the way composure unraveled arrogance, the way a woman who had been dismissed and underestimated walked out untouchable. It wasn't just a courtroom story anymore. It was a parable, one destined to be retold in captions, in hashtags, in whispered admiration. Calm crushes chaos. By the time Crockett disappeared beyond the courthouse doors, the outcome was undeniable. She had not only endured, she had transcended. And in doing so, she reminded everyone watching that the true measure of power is not how loud it strikes, but how unshaken it stands. She tried to silence Jasmine, but silence didn't win. What the world remembers is Jasmine's reply, measured, deliberate, undeniable. A single moment that cracked the crown of authority and reshaped the balance of power before our very eyes. And now, the question is no longer about what Judge Judy said or how loud the gavel struck. The question is about what you saw, what you felt. If you were in that courtroom, whose side would you be on? Would you follow the force of command or the calm that refused to bend? Drop your reaction in the comments. This isn't just their story. It's your moment to weigh in, to claim your place in the conversation. And if you believe that calm will always crush chaos, then hit subscribe and stand with the movement that refuses to be silenced. Because one truth remains: authority can stumble, arrogance can falter, but dignity endures. Jasmine Crockett showed it in a single reply. And if one reply can humble a judge, what happens in the next viral clash?